on the issue of publishing, I want to bring in George, Professor George Richards. He did say something on the chat, and I want him to expand on that slightly. George, can you give us your views, please?
A couple of things. I mean, mentoring is essential, and it's not just, a lot of times these kids don't know how to do it. And that is incumbent upon the senior professor, their guide, to show them. And this goes beyond just merely what you learn in the classroom. It's what you learn about how to negotiate the profession. Those things that are often intangible in those close working relationships that I was very fortunate to work with a couple of senior professors that really brought me along and trained me, and I'd like to think trained me pretty well. And I've tried to pass that along to students that I've had in classrooms. Unfortunately, these doors are closed to a lot of students, a lot of minorities. In the US, I can't speak for other areas of the world, but I will speak for the US. My perception is we don't do that very well here. There are a lot that would disagree with me, and that's certainly their right, but this is how I see it.
I can ask the question that Dr. Brankoga wanted to ask. He's having difficulties. He says, there are sufficient opportunities for collaborating with more established academics in the early years of scholarship, so that by the time Black academics become established, they already have a name within their specialist field. Dauda, what's your view on that in terms of collaboration and collaboration with more established academics? Is there an opportunity for, say, in your university where that happens, or in other universities that we know about?
Right. But I think collaboration is very important, as George has mentioned, and a couple of other participants have mentioned. And I think that collaboration would be more effective, not just through within the institution itself. When a younger scholar comes into a department, for example, or into a particular college, that there is a more senior colleague that mentors that person, right? And provides resources for that person to be able to maybe make presentations at professional conferences. And then that paper from a professional conference can then be reworked on and re-edited, and more materials included, and then eventually it goes out for publication in a high-ranked journal within the field. So mentorship is very important, very, very important. But you see, mentorship can also occur only when there are senior colleagues within the profession in the field. But if there is systemic racism, right? If there is institutional racism, which is the barrier, that's the barrier, right? That usually represses people of minority background, that they could not even rise to that level to be able to either gain tenure and then be able to even mentor others, right? So that's the major challenge, I believe, that people of color are faced with in the academia, especially in the Western world, whether we are talking of Britain or Canada or North America or even other European countries. Right? So unless you have that system where there is inclusion, where knowledge and knowledge production and the contributions of people is regarded as always being important, irrespective of their color, right, or their gender, right. That I think is very important, which is very difficult in the academia, and that is the challenge I think that we have in this conversation, and that's what makes this very important, so that we can begin to identify these barriers and begin to see the ways to negotiate them and to be able to overcome them. So I'll put it at that point. Yeah.
Thank you very much, Dauda. If you have any questions, I can't see everyone right now, just send something on the chat or to Miriam directly. There is a question from Baronda Montgomery. She said, how many Black Americans and Black UK how many Black Americans and Black UK collaborate more effectively with Africans in academia in the UK and USA? So I think she's asking how many, or here she's asking how many Black American and Black UK academics collaborate more effectively with Africans in the UK and USA. Charlie, I think what we're doing at PROWIBO is a lot to do with that, isn't it?
Yeah, I agree that the greatest attraction for me is the fact that I get to take the benefits of university education in the UK, stroke professional career, and say, I will teach you what I learned in the sort of 30 years of my working here, and hope that you get that same opportunity, whether it be in Africa, if you manage to get to the Europe or the US. I'll give you that for free. I don't expect to be paid to teach them, but I learned it and I'll give it to you. I want you to do well. And it comes down to the point we're talking about academia, whereas I don't necessarily want them to follow an academic path. I simply will say, yep, this is what I know. If you can use it, good luck. And yeah, I guess that's where I really come at this from, is that we have the knowledge, we need to be able to use it within our own communities to further everybody else. And if we get paid, great. If we don't get paid, we've done our bit.
Right. Let's move on to another point, which from the initial conversation we're having, another point came up which I wanted to touch on. The question we asked of the 4 questions we were discussing today is, what measures do you think should be put in place specifically in these institutions that will help Black academics? We've been talking about mentoring, etc. But what measures should be put in place specifically to help deal with the issue of discrimination in academia? Dauda mentioned about the Diversity, Equality and Inclusion Initiative. What measures do you think, in addition to that, in your institutions should be put in place to see how best we can counter these issues?
Yeah, thank you, Majek. You know, as I reflected on this issue, I think one of the things that could be put in place is that people of minority background, scholars of minority background that are in higher institutions of learning, should also take this challenge upon themselves. As I said from the beginning, this is about power and about resources. There is no one that would be willing to just hand it over to you, right? You should just stand up and make sure that you struggle for it. What do I mean by that? What I'm saying is that people of minority backgrounds in the academia, in higher institutions of learning, whether it's in Europe or it's in North America, will have to also begin developing networks within their institutions to be engaged in the governance system of their institutions, because there are different layers of exercising authority within these institutions. For example, in my university, there is what is referred to as the Senate faculty, which usually is a forum for all the faculty to have a conversation about the governance of the university, right? So as minorities at University of Michigan-Flint, we will have to collaborate and bring pressure within that governance structure about issues of inequity, right? To raise that level of the conversation. such that colleagues would understand, such that we can build allies even within the white majority faculty, because there are many that would really be willing to come on board to say that this is not fair, there is some inequity, there is injustice, we have seen it on the streets in the United States, we need to do something about it in the academia. And then you would find allies that would begin to say, oh yes, we really need to begin to change, right? We need to begin to allow systems where people of minority background, even in recruitment, would be recruited more into the university system. They would be mentored. They would be able to get tenure. They would be able to also mentor others and grow in the system. So being involved, being engaged, I believe is one of the ways to begin to combat this challenge. So I'll stop at this point. Majek, over to you again.
Thank you very much, Dauda. I want Rachel to come in before I go to Lorraine. Lorraine has made an interesting point. Lorraine has made an interesting point about the issue of EDI. Lorraine, you said something about the EDI being abused in some way. I'm interested in that. In your view on that.
Yes. So I know. I know we'll talk later about our experiences, but I've done a lot of work around EDI outside of both in academia and outside of academia. And as much as it is a good initiative, sometimes there's a tendency to then rely on the EDI team. And we say EDI is equality, diversity, and inclusion. So what happens within institutions, and I've seen this both in academia and outside, is it becomes the responsibility of the committee or the team. And most times it's us ethnic minorities who are passionate about issues of inclusion who then get involved in these committees and teams initiatives. So it becomes our responsibility to push the agenda. So everyone else then thinks, well, we have a team, that's their job, and are not necessarily involved, are not aware. And also institutions will use these policies for legal reasons. It's just to tick the box. It's just so if we're questioned, we can say, oh, we have an EDI policy and we have an EDI team. So I do question very much how effective, or rather have the conversation around how can we make them effective so that they work in our favor and bring the change that we want. Because most times to say, yes, we have an EDI team and that's what they're doing, does not necessarily mean that senior management will listen to the team as well. It does not mean that they will take on board what they suggest in regards to decision making, in regards to strategies and policies and how the institution works. So I guess for me, is having that conversation is how do we then make it work in our favor to effect change?
I'm going to come back to you on that point. I linked with what George posted something at 2:56. George, in a nutshell, your post says that effective change can only be made if you put Black people or people of color in significant power and authority. Talking about the provost, chancellors, academic deans, and etc., because these are the guys who shape the university's agenda. And unless that is done, there will not be effective change. George, can you expand on that much in a bit, please?
It's been my experience that there are, even if you find very few people of color that are academics in colleges and universities, you're going to find even fewer that hold positions that set the mission for those institutions. Provost, deans, etc. I think these people even have more power than perhaps presidents of universities, who oftentimes are figureheads or have other responsibilities than overseeing the academic affairs of the institution. These people are going to be the ones that affect change. They're going to set hiring policies. They're going to oversee equity and maintain and make sure that it is implemented. And until you get more people in these positions, it's not going to happen. Just not going to. I don't see it happening, at least not in the U.S.
Rachel, can you give us your contribution now?
So I'm kind of struggling because there's this fascinating dialogue going on screen, and then there's another one going and running parallel in the chat, and I'm kind of drawn to both of them. I think that something that Charlie said earlier about opening the path, like it's not necessarily, I think that it's super, and this ties into the mentorship as well. I think it's incredibly important that that young people of color, young Black people see role models there that show them that, you know, it's I love this expression, if they can see it, they can be it. You know, it's so important. Like as a female, like I know a kind of similar idea, and so I think having, you know, ensuring that we can support Black academics and Black colleagues to reach the heights of their talent and their output is one side of it, and then supporting, you know, that will help inspire other young people who may not currently consider a career in academia because they don't see very many successful Black and people of color in academia, and they think, oh, they may think, oh, that's not for us, or that's not somewhere that we have a place, or that we can find a place, or whatever, or that we're welcome. Also, I had a question about the mentoring. I wanted to throw it back at the group. In terms of mentoring, what do you see as being more of an ideal situation? Would you like to see young Black students mentored just by, you know, or not just by senior Black academics who can connect more with the experience, or with the white and non-Black academics who can say, well, here, let me open doors for you? So is there an advantage to one or the other?
I will go to Barunda right now, and then we can come back to Richard's question. Dauda, I'm going to come back to you in a bit. I want to hear from Barunda. Barunda made an interesting comment about Black administration in a large US university. Can you expand on that a bit for us, Barunda?
Yes, I was just responding to the earlier point that we need to have Black individuals in administration to be able to impact change. And I'm an administrator at Michigan State University, a professor and also assistant provost. And I agree that there are these positions that allow you to impact change, but there's still gatekeeping as to who's allowed into those positions. And very frequently, these institutions select for people of color or Black individuals for those positions who share the perspectives of those who are already there. And so sometimes there's representation of having a Black person there, but they're actually contributing to the gatekeeping that happens in these spaces. So I think there still has to be a commitment to institutional change, to select people who are in these positions who are still pushing on the barriers to inclusion of us broadly.
Can I push you a bit more on that point? How would you say, or in what way do you think that Black people are contributing to the gatekeeping aspect?
Well, I think frequently the way that I do work on mentorship and leadership as part of my scholarly work, but I think very frequently the ways in which we select and reward leaders who get leadership positions and maintain them, function in certain ways that maintain the status quo in institutions. And it's not always white people who maintain whiteness in these spaces. Too frequently, once you have access to a leadership position, people feel that they have to respond and work in certain ways to keep those positions and to keep power. And frequently that's maintaining these spaces as they are, as opposed to pushing for radical change and transformation that would allow us to really reach our stated goals of diversity, equity, and inclusion.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Dauda, I'll come to you, and then I will set out Rachel's question. Dauda.
Yeah, I think Barunda made a very important point that, you know, building up on what George had suggested, that, okay, if we have a black person that is maybe the chancellor of a university, or is a provost or a dean, etc., that it will help. And I agree with that point, that putting people of color, of minority background, or increasing gender diversity, etc., that is one of the mechanisms. But I think we also have to be very careful, because it still comes back to issue of power and the way that power is articulated in social spaces and settings so that it can be maintained, right? A system of hegemony. What am I saying? Maybe let me give an example that is a little bit far away, but it might make my point. For example, African Americans in the United States for hundreds of years have been arguing about social justice and equality and inclusion in the political system. And then in 2008, Barack Obama gets elected as a black president. And then the argument now is that, okay, why is it that they are demonstrating on the streets when they have already had a black president? So you see the way that ideology works in institutions and the structures of power in order to reinforce hegemony. In other words, as Berenda was saying, we have A or B as a dean, as a chancellor, as a provost. Why are you complaining, right? And meanwhile, change does not take place. The structures of hegemony is still maintained within the university system. So it's good to appoint people of color, minorities in those positions. But those people appointed would also have to be committed, to change. They would have to be committed to seeing that there is injustice in the university system and that they are willing to empower other faculty, irrespective of their identity, whether white or black, as Rachel was saying, that they could help in bringing about change in the institution. As I said, that it involves building alliances, even within white faculty, we could work with allies there that are willing to bring about change, right? So it's something that is doable. But as Berenda has rightly said, that appointing people in position for the sake of fulfilling issues of diversity might not go very far, but it is a first step. So I'll put it at that point. Yeah.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Dauda. I must also mention that there are many Black Africans, Americans, who believe that Barack Obama did nothing for the Black community. So I think there's that pressure also on Black heads of universities to do things which they may not be able to do, notwithstanding the fact that they're there due to other social issues and other academic issues. But I'll go back to a point Rachel made. Rachel made a point about mentoring, about whether Black students should be mentored by other Black academics or also white academics. I don't know if I put your question properly, Rachel.
Yes, I mean the opposition that I'm looking at there is perhaps if I was to mentor a young Black student, I might not be able to fully comprehend their experience, and so perhaps there'd be something lacking. But on the other hand, perhaps a young Black student doesn't have is at a particular institution where they don't have a senior Black person to mentor them for any of the reasons that we've been discussing. So yeah, that's the sort of dichotomy I'm looking at.
I'd like to probably say, I think mentorship is important, notwithstanding who's offering it. So the important thing is, bottom line, mentorship is important to receive and be given. So if a senior Black person is available to offer it, well and good. But if the senior Black person is not available, take mentorship from whoever is offering it and run with that and, grow. don't make excuses like I can't get this, so I can't go this way. So for me, the bottom line is mentorship is given, take it, use it.
Thank you, Faith. I must comment also, I was mentored by when I was at university, my dissertation supervisor was a white gentleman called Ian Brown. He actually mentored me, and he also gave me my first job as a lecturer. He was just keen for me to go into academia, and he gave me a module to lecture that I hated, constitutional law, and I had to lecture it. And when I went to him, he called me and said to me, "I have a job for you, a part-time job for you." So what it is? He laughed and said, "Consti." I'm thinking, no, you're joking. But what he did by putting me in that uncomfortable position made me grow as an academic and as a lawyer and as an advocate, because he put me in a place where I felt uncomfortable, but I overcame that uncomfortability to be a better academic and a better lawyer. So I agree with you, Faith. Mentoring can come from anywhere. I was mentored by a white academic who did a very, very good job, and there was no issue of race in any of our interaction. He just saw me as if I say so myself, a bright student who is going to mentor. Thank you very much for that. I wanted to go back to George's left. The question put by Dr. Brankoka 301 was talking about investigation research inequalities within universities. Dr. Brankoka, can you give us a bit of an insight on that? We have about 10 minutes more to go before we shut down on this point.
I was saying we need to shed a light on the inequalities, because if it becomes obvious that if this is actually rigorously investigated and put out there, then it's very, very difficult to shy away from that.
So if we come to the conclusion that the EDI, the Equality and Diversity Inclusion Initiative, which Dauda was talking about, is something to go by, but there are dangers about it or concerns about it. To round up, what do you think as an organization, Professors Without Borders, what do you think we can put out as a potential solution to this issue in academia? Dauda, I'll come back to you because you put in the Diversity Inclusion Initiative.
Yes, that is one of the mechanisms that my institution is implementing, and it arose from a commitment by the university leadership. In other words, the chancellor and the provost and the deans, along with all stakeholders in our university, realized that, look, a university located in an 80% city that is African American needs to really make sure that it reflects the diversity of the community in which it is located. So it's an initiative that has just started, and I hope that it will succeed. But the important point is that the leadership in the institution matters. Are the leaders themselves committed to issues of diversity? If the leaders are not committed, as George was saying, it will be very difficult to bring about change. Right? It will be very difficult to increase diversity across the board, whether it is in race or gender, etc. So the leaders of the institutions themselves will have to be committed. As for the second part of your question, Majek, I think PROWIBO can play an important role by highlighting this issue and bring it into the media and the conversation in societies, and building networks with other non-governmental organizations in order to increase awareness about this problem in universities, right? I think that's one of the ways. And of course, also through conferences like these, that eventually maybe the materials could be put together in published form in order to increase accessibility, to raising awareness about the problem. And that way we could build more allies, right? across the board, white, brown, male, female, etc., that will be willing to be agents of change wherever they find themselves, whether it's in Africa or in Europe or in North America, that we all are working together to see that there is change in institutions of higher learning, because we're in this together. Yeah, we are in it together. You know, if there is any lesson to learn from COVID, is that nobody is isolated again from these problems. So I'll put it at this point. Yeah.
Thank you very much. You just rounded off it very nicely. But the point I also want to make is what we have concluded, I believe, is that this has to start from the top. Universities have to have in the agenda, in the documentation, in the 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 year plan, a commitment to equality, in both in student academia and also in teaching faculties. That cannot be underestimated. Whatever we're talking about here, which is good, we've raised the issues. What it comes down to, in my view, for what I've gathered, is that we need to have a bigger input and a bigger commitment from the universities to have this as a key and fundamental position for them, that they want to increase diversity and equality in higher education, and this should come from the top and not just from any diversity body or whatnot. It has to come from the top. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, everyone, for this fascinating, fantastic conference. It's been eye-opening. And Lorraine, your last post just made me shiver about the amount of money that the government has put into the coronavirus budget and zero for ethnic minorities. This just shows.
Yeah, I think it's important because I know we're rounding off. Like I said, I'll share it later. Is if you're thinking of in terms of being Black in academia, you also have to look at different aspects of the role and the job. Universities are now like businesses. You're expected to bring in money. So there's issue of publishing, there's issue of teaching, there's issue of student care, there's also issue of research projects and bringing in money. So that example in itself shows another aspect of some of the challenges we face as Black in academia, or ethnic minorities, whether you're Asian, you're Black, brown. And I think that's also key. So we need to touch on those different aspects of it's not only just within the teaching, but it's also in terms of bringing in money and research, because promotion will also be determined by such things is how much money have you brought into the university, how much have you collaborated with communities and other organizations, and impact all these things. So I think that's a factor. But if people are interested, I'll see if I can share with you to share to everybody else.
Thank you very much.